quickly.
Order, order. Rebecca Long-Bailey to move this highly appropriate and fantastic motion. Right Honourable Member for Staffordshire Moorlands and for all members who've supported this very important debate application and for the Backbench Business Committee for granting it. I also want to thank the Honourable Member for Bristol South, who is the chair of the All-Party Group on Ireland and the Irish in Britain, for her support and her ongoing work in championing the Irish diaspora in Britain. As we know, the Feast of St Patrick will be celebrated on Sunday, and here in the UK, we will be celebrating the strong cultural, political and business ties between Britain and Ireland and the immense contribution of the Irish diaspora in Britain, and what a contribution it continues to be. Niall Gallagher, Chairman of Irish Heritage, has described the contribution of the Irish to cultural life in the UK as incalculable. The contribution of Irish Labour to the British construction industry has been described by Sir William McAlpine as immeasurable. As of June 2023, 13,700 members of NHS staff in England reported their nationality as Irish. This includes around 2,300 doctors and over 4,200 nurses. And when President Higgins came to Manchester 10 years ago, he said 55,000 directors who are Irish sit on the boards of British companies. Now that number is even bigger today. The brightest and best who lay claim to an Irish heritage are smashing the glass ceiling in every aspect of working and public life, and I'm proud to be celebrating it today.
Will she give way?
Yes.
I'm grateful to her for giving way and her kind words about the All-Party Group. This week, at the All-Party Group meeting, we remembered our friend Sir Tony Lloyd, and his proud members and talk in this debate, but also how we as a community do recognise both the past, but very much the future of the changing diaspora. And would she agree with me that that's one of the important things of this debate today, that we recognise that contribution, but how generations coming forward and our continual travel across these islands is important for us to celebrate and plan for the future.
Thank you, and I completely agree with the words that my colleague have just stated, and also would like to place on record my thanks to the late great Tony Lloyd, who was my constituency MP as a child growing up, and he was a huge champion of the Irish community in Greater Manchester, and his legacy lives on today. But my colleague's right, it's important to remember that identities and links are changing year on year with each passing generation that either comes here to call Britain their home or has third, fourth and fifth generation children and grandchildren who try to keep their cultural heritage and ties going. Now, the social and economic impact of the Irish diaspora in the UK and across the world has been duly recognised by the Irish government in Ireland's diaspora strategy, which aims to celebrate and strengthen the social, economic and cultural bonds between Britain and Ireland and other parts of the world. As they say in the strategy, the diverse and dynamic global community connected to Ireland through the ties of citizenship, heritage and affinity, retaining a strong sense of Irish identity that has remained vibrant over the ages. And in Britain, at the time of the 2021 census, there were about 523,000 Irish-born people living in England and Wales alone, but these figures capture only a fraction of the second and third generation of Irish heritage. Bronwyn Walter, Emeritus Professor of Irish Diaspora Studies at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge, estimated a few years ago that the figure for those with at least one Irish parent or grandparent is roughly 5 million. And as visits to Irish cultural and community centres across Britain will show, the intergenerational community is thriving. Irish in Britain have stated that the numbers of people frequenting these centres as well as the profiles of those actively involved in running activities at these cultural hubs, confirm the increasing diversity of people who embrace their Irish heritage. Now, every first, second and even third generation Irish diaspora member will know that when we hear a surname that sounds Irish, or we've an inkling someone has a bit of Irish in the background, we always set about finding out where your relatives, parents or grandparents are from, even down to the road they lived on, in case we know that anybody might know them. They want to check the pedigree. So I'll get that bit out of the way first, and I'll do a little bit of a pedigree check on myself for anybody who wants to know. So my mum, previously a Kelly, before she married, is from Galway, and my dad is a Long, and he is from Belfast. And we've got an interesting story about the Galway Kellys, because if anyone knows Galway City, apparently my mum's family had the shop and lived in the famous historical focal point in the city called the Spanish Arch. Yeah, I know. Now, the Kellys have laid claim to this historic link for years. Anyone who was anyone was told of the Kellys' claim to this important historic building, until one day, whilst wandering about the Galway Museum, we came across an old handwritten logbook. And in the logbook, it stated this spooky fact, that even before the Kellys, hundreds of years before, in fact, because the arch was built in the 1500s, a bishop called Bishop Long lived there. And that gave my dad rise to then claim that the Spanish Arch was actually the ancestral home of the Longs. And this is further proven as the lane next to the arch along the harbour walls in Galway is called the Long Walk. Now, suffice to say, the Kelly relatives were not impressed that my dad was making these protestations, because they'd always thought that the Long Walk was called the Long Walk because it was a long road. Now, further pedigree checks have been carried out on members of my family. My husband is a Bailey. He has no known Irish ancestry, and he had to go through his own pedigree check when he was presented to the family many years ago. And this escalated to the point that during one family visit to Galway, just before we married, the whole of the local pub that my aunt and uncle frequent had been furiously researching the Bailey family name to check out my husband to make sure he was all right for me to marry. And despite no known Irish links, they presented him with an Irish surname, genealogical history of the surname Bailey, to prove to him that he actually had an Irish surname and therefore was Irish somewhere along the line, even if he didn't know it himself yet. And they also found him a castle allegedly owned by generations of the Bailey family and presented him with a picture and details of it so we could check out if he had any ancestral claim to it. But joking aside, I was proud to grow up immersed in our thriving Greater Manchester Irish community. Every year, I was dispatched to the Irish Centre, St Kentigern's, Chorlton Irish Club, the Southern, you name it, to hear the music, arts and culture of my heritage. I read my mum's Irish Post every week, the voice of the Irish in Britain, because it was important to know who we were, where we came from, and to foster that duty, to keep that heritage alive for future generations. Yes?
Just mentioning the Irish Post, it's worth making a tribute to Brendan McClure, who was the editor of the Irish Post, who held the Irish community together with information, community activities, even in the darkest of times, and then linked up with Brendan Mulcair, who was the musician that actually in London in particular taught generations Irish dance, Irish fiddle and Irish whistle. It was just that generation in the toughest of times held it together.
I completely agree with the comments that my colleague has made. I think the Irish Post was not only the voice of the Irish in Britain, it was a lifeline to many Irish people who'd emigrated here in quite often very difficult times, and acted as a support mechanism to bring communities together so that we knew what was happening in the towns and cities across the UK. And despite the troubles that many people might have been facing, they felt that they definitely weren't alone. Indeed, the huge Irish diaspora across the north of England has been recognised by the Irish government, who have opened the Consulate General of Ireland for the north of England, and its establishment reflects a strong commitment to developing the British-Irish relationship and will strengthen the political, commercial, community and cultural ties between Ireland and the north of England. And on the contribution of the Irish community in Greater Manchester, Previous Irish President Michael Higgins said that they had given the area countless talented footballers, vibrant cultural festivals, talented students, writers and business people. And for example, in the greatest city on earth, Salford, of course, it was the Irish who made Salford a city in its own right. During the mid-19th century, there was an influx of Irish people into the Salford area, partly due to the Great Hunger in Ireland, and in 1848, Salford Roman Catholic Cathedral was consecrated, reflecting Salford's large Irish-born community at that time. It was also the Irish who built the Manchester Ship Canal, which spurred on the Industrial Revolution in the northwest. And we've made our mark on culture and music too, from renowned playwright Sheila Delaney to Sean Ryder of the Happy Mondays. The list of successful Irish Salfordians who've made their mark on the world is endless. And it's also said that the famous song about Salford, Dirty Old Town, written by Salfordian Ewan MacColl, has all but taken out its own Irish citizenship. And importantly in Salford, it was the Irish community who was at the heart of historic political theory and political activism. One example, Mary Burns, was a working-class woman with Irish parents, best known as the lifelong partner of Frederick Eccles. Now, you don't hear much about her, sadly, because they were living quite a bohemian lifestyle, living in sin, and that was a big no-no in those days. And it's speculated that because Eccles made sure Karl Marx got rid of all of his personal letters to Karl Marx on him and Mary after Eccles died, we know very little about Mary Burns. But it's said that Burns guided Eccles through Salford, showing him the horrific poverty of Salford and Manchester, and influenced his thinking and research, which later resulted in the well-known political work, The Conditions of the Working Class. We also lay claim to another fierce political activist in Salford, Eva Gore Booth, who was a famous Salford suffragette and trade unionist and the younger sister of Constance, also known as Constance Markovich. The two sisters spent their former years in Sligo, with Constance going off to Ireland to do her thing, and Eva making her way to Salford, where she campaigned for women's suffrage, trade unionism, and helped set up the Manchester and Salford Women's Trade Union Council, which was a precursor to the TUC we know today. But it's often the less famous people who have the most evocative stories to tell. Irish in Britain has recently launched its Look Back to Look Forward exhibition. And if you don't get a chance to see it in person, please check it out online on the Irish in Britain website. The exhibition looks at the community's journey over the last 50 years, sharing personal stories, the struggles and triumphs that have shaped each family's history. The project was launched because many Irish immigrants who settled in Britain since 1973 are now elderly, risking the loss of their migration memories. The project has shared these important voices to ensure that their legacies endure. Now, some of these voices came to Britain to escape cultural conservatism, conflict or discrimination. Others left Ireland for economic reasons. And each generation who came faced their own challenges and their own opportunities. From those who left home in search of a hopeful future but endured the horrific racism of the no blacks, no Irish, no dogs era in the late 60s and early 70s, to those who faced less direct forms of racism during the Troubles, those who found greater freedoms and opportunities, to those who worked hard to build a life, build businesses and a bright future for their families. And there are those who saw the growing community and sought to build a network of support and shared cultural heritage that endures in cities and towns across the UK today. The exhibition highlights the multifaceted journey of Irish immigrants and their enduring impact on Britain. No story is the same, and the stories exhibited celebrate the shared heritage and contributions of the Irish diaspora. Now, on the issue of embracing Irish heritage, those with Irish heritage will know, as the Irish Times stated many years ago when finding out about Tony Blair's Irish ancestry, that no sooner does a major world figure emerge than the Irish have him or her pegged down to their roots. Now, Tony Blair's grandparents were from Ballyshannon in County Donegal, of course, but I will lay claim to a few more leading figures. Our lovely chair today, Dame McDonagh, has a proud Irish heritage. Two British Prime Ministers, William Petty, the 2nd Earl of Shelbourne, and Arthur Wellesley, the 1st Duke of Wellington, were born in Ireland. Dennis Healy and Jim Callaghan, both of Irish origins. The late great Tony Lloyd and countless parliamentarians across the House lay claim to Irish heritage. And who knew this? Margaret Thatcher's great-grandmother hails from Bunane in County Kerry. Also, in the world of politics, interestingly, I was also reading in Jacobin magazine that a disproportionately large number of Britain's trade union leaders are the sons and daughters of Irish immigrants too. Mick Lynch of the RMT, his deputy Eddie Dempsey, Mick Whelan, General Secretary of ASLEF, Sharon Graham, General Secretary of Unite, Baroness Frances O'Grady, former General Secretary of the TUC, Christina McKinney, General Secretary of Unison, is the daughter of Irish immigrants to Glasgow, and Jo Grady, General Secretary of the University and College Union, is the granddaughter of Irish immigrants. Further, the impact on science and civil service is also profound. Some of the recent winners of the Irish Government's Presidential Distinguished Service Award for the Irish abroad include Dr. Patricia Mary Lewis, who is the Research Director for International Security at Chatham House, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who is the Nobel Prize-winning astrophysicist, Professor Theresa Lamb, one of the co-creators of the AstraZeneca vaccine, all from Irish backgrounds. So too is Dr. Susan Hopkins, who we saw on our TV screens during the pandemic as the Chief Medical Advisor for the UK Health Security Agency. And in the arts, we have a list of inspirational people too long to mention today, sadly, but they include names such as Danny Boyle, Carolina Hearn, Dusty Springfield, Elvis Costello, Boy George, the Beatles, Kate Bush, David Bowie, Cilla Black, the Sex Pistols, the Smiths, Oasis, Robbie Williams, Ed Sheeran, the Pogues, the Spice Girls, the Stone Roses, the Happy Mondays, Primal Scream, Radiohead. The list is quite simply endless. The success and impact of the diaspora on every aspect of life in the UK is profound. But all this aside, it's the everyday actions of my community and communities across the UK that I'm so proud of. All the achievements the Irish and the Irish diaspora have made here in the UK, and the ever-strengthening connections between Ireland and the UK that are being built. We have huge numbers of brilliant and dedicated Irish diaspora politicians and councillors across the UK who are transforming lives within their communities. We have amazing businesses, charitable and social organisations such as Irish in Britain, Irish Community Care, Irish Heritage, the World Irish Heritage Centre in Manchester, Irish societies and clubs right across the UK, sports clubs, radio stations, dance and music groups, festivals, and even welfare advice services. And of course, special mention also needs to go to the Irish Post and Irish World, who've been keeping the Irish community in Britain connected for decades. So, to everybody watching this debate today, whether you are first, second, or third generation Irish, or whether you are a friend of the Irish community, thank you for what you've done and what you continue to do. As former Irish President Higgins has said, the closeness and warmth that we laud today was founded to a large extent upon the lives and sacrifices of generations of Irish immigrants who settled in this country. Generations of Irish people who came here and contributed so positively to nearly every aspect of British society and did so much to make Britain what it is today, while at the same time fostering understanding, tolerance and cooperation between our two countries. That bond goes from strength to strength today, and it's thanks to those who continue to ensure that it endures. And so for Sunday, wherever you are, whoever you are celebrating with, La Éla Pórig Sunna Adiv, happy St. Patrick's Day.
I think this may be redundant, but I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that the House has considered St Patrick's Day and the contribution of the Irish diaspora in the UK. Dame Karen Bradley.
Dame Siobhan, and I think it's probably the first time I've served under your chairmanship, but it's an absolute honour to do so. Can I also pay tribute to my co-sponsor, the member for Salford and Eccles, for her excellent opening speech and setting out so eloquently the contribution of the Irish community in her community, but also in the wider United Kingdom. She really is such an advocate for the Irish community in the UK. Can I also thank the Backbench Business Committee for allocating time for this debate on the 14th of March, the closest we could get to St Patrick's Day. We were very, very keen when we went to the Backbench Business Committee to have the debate as close to St Patrick's Day as possible. It meant we couldn't be in the chamber for obvious reasons, it's Estimates Day, but it does mean that we've got a full 3 hours debate and we have the chance as close to St Patrick's Day as possible to make a contribution and to mention our views and our love for the Irish diaspora and all things Irish in our communities. So I feel that I have to confess that the family test I fail because I am a Howarth, a Mancunian Howarth, and the Howarths don't seem to have a great deal of Irish heritage in them. We tend to just be from Manchester. So I can pick out lots of bits of Manchester I've heritage from, but I can't pick out anywhere in Ireland. But I can claim a married link because the Bradleys that I married into were originally the Bradleys of County Tyrone. So I'm very proud that although I cannot do it for myself, my children have that Irish link and they can at least say proudly that they have that Irish heritage. Because it is something that does matter and people do really value being able to identify with Ireland and with the Irish community. And my mother tells me when she was growing up in Manchester, the role of the Irish community in Gorton, where she lived. Her father worked in construction, actually, and he knew so many Irish colleagues, and it was a really important part of that part of Manchester. And she's mentioned the football clubs. I confess I support the team that probably has fewer Irish players in history and city, but United has, of course, always had a very significant number of Irish players and a very, very big Irish support contingent. I think trying to get a plane from Dublin to Manchester or Belfast to Manchester on the day of a United match is nigh on impossible. Also, of course, my links to Ireland really were cemented when I was appointed as the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, or SOSNI, as they're known in the Northern Ireland office. It was a shock. I won't pretend it wasn't a shock. The late, great James Brokenshire had been doing the role and doing a really excellent job. I don't think it's possible to find anyone who would ever say that James Brokenshire ever did anything that wasn't utterly brilliant. And he was brilliant at that job. But he had been diagnosed with the first time he had cancer, lung cancer, and for his health and his family's sake, he needed to step away from the role. And I must admit, I'd gone into my department. I was at that point Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and I walked into the department in the morning, planning where I was going to, what we were going to do for the rest of the year. It was the first day back. It was actually James's 50th birthday. So I'd been wishing him a happy birthday, and then the news came through that he was resigning, and we didn't know why. And then it suddenly dawns on me that someone's going to have to go to Northern Ireland. And it had never occurred to me that I would be given that role. But when the then Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead, invited me into the Cabinet room and asked me if I'd take the role on and said, you've been away, and more importantly, I'd served with her in the Home Office and understood the sensitivities around the security issues, could I please take the role on? And it was a shock to the system, but I have to say the greatest honour. It is truly, and the Minister will know this, serving in the Northern Ireland office is truly one of the greatest honours one can have in this place. Because the warmth of welcome and the depth of hope and expectation that are put in a politician, there are very few roles that have that as much as the Secretary of State and the Minister of State for Northern Ireland. Because Northern Ireland is somewhere that politics genuinely changed lives. There are very few places where politics and politicians managed to do the most incredible thing now 26 years ago in that Belfast Good Friday Agreement and get the weapons laid down and the violence to end. I think we all agree there are still many problems, and there are still some people who have never accepted the peaceful solution to the constitutional status of Northern Ireland. But the vast, vast majority of people in Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom accepted that that political settlement and the compromises that were involved in it were worth making because of the change that could happen. And the two architects in the late Lord Trimble and John Hume are people who really should be admired for their ability to put aside sectarian differences, come together and show true leadership to solve what had seemed an intractable problem. And I wish that there were more leaders like those around the world who could do the same thing and make that difference. The other person I do want to mention from my time in the Northern Ireland office is Tony Lloyd, because he was my shadow, and he was a wonderful person to shadow me. And we would occasionally have ding-dongs across the dispatch box. That's what politics is about. But I can absolutely assure everybody that when we got behind closed doors, we got on like a house of cards. We supported different football teams, again, that Manchester difference. But we always had great conversations, and if he was in Belfast at the same time I was in Belfast, and we were able to make it work, we would make a point of getting together with the Honourable Lady from Bristol South. I will call her my honourable friend from Bristol South, because she was part of his team too. And we really could have great conversations. We wanted the same thing. We wanted the restoration of devolved government. We wanted to work together to achieve that. We had different ways in. We had different people we could influence, but we were all trying to get to the same thing. And I am so relieved that we do currently have devolved government in Northern Ireland, because it is absolutely vital for the people of Northern Ireland that they are properly represented by the people they elect to represent them. From a constituency point of view, again, I don't have a great Irish diaspora, but I do have a great Irish employer. In fact, I have two great Irish employers, but I have Advanced Proteins, which owns a plant that does animal rendering. It's not a terribly attractive thing to do, but they do it very, very well. And I also have a plant from Ornua, who are the Irish dairy company, and they bring the Irish cheese and butter from across the Irish Sea to Leek in Staffordshire, and Kerrygold is packaged in Leek, and all the cheese from Ireland is processed and grated and put into blocks and sold to consumers across Great Britain. So I am great need for the Irish to be very successful, because they employ so many of my constituents, and it is incredibly important that Ornua and Advanced Proteins know that we welcome them in the United Kingdom, and we want them to continue to invest. If I may, I will now turn and direct my comments to the topic of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly, which I have the great honour to currently co-chair. Following on, I must say, from my honourable friend from Romford, who did a fantastic job as co-chair of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly for so many years, and I know has been missed in our meetings. For those that don't know, the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly actually started from the Interparliamentary Union, because there was a recognition back in the early 90s that we have these interparliamentary groups, and there was conversations at government level, but actually conversations at parliamentarian level are incredibly important in allowing people to recognise that we all face the same problems, that we all want the same solutions. And perhaps before that, before what was the British Irish Parliamentary Group, there maybe have been a lack of trust, a lack of understanding, a lack of ability to empathise with parliamentarians on the other side of the Irish Sea. And so the two interparliamentary unions, the British Group and the Interparliamentary Union, which I'm also honoured to chair here currently in our Parliament, and the one from the Erectus, were asked if they could form a grouping of parliamentarians to find a way to open that dialogue up. And this was 6 years before the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and a very important part of that dialogue that allowed the atmosphere to be in place for the agreement to happen. And I must pay tribute to the late Lord Temple Morris, who was one of those who led the initiative from Westminster, and also Dick Spring from the Erectus. And we were really honoured because at an assembly recently, Dick was able to come and address our dinner. And it was lovely to hear from somebody who'd been there, not just an architect of the agreement, but someone who'd been there before that, trying to lay the groundwork, trying to put in place the situation and the atmosphere that meant that agreement could happen. I must also pay tribute to the wonderful Amanda Healy. who has been the administrator of BIPA for 30 years. Without Amanda, the whole thing would collapse. She is utterly amazing, and it would be wrong of me to say anything other than she is absolutely fantastic, and thank you, Amanda. And to the brilliant clerk, Martin Atkins, who also makes sure that I know what I'm saying as the co-chair, because he makes sure he keeps me on track and ensures I'm entirely delivering the message that needs to be delivered. Of course I will.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for her very kind remarks? I was very proud to be the co-chair of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly from 2016 to 2022, and I would like to commend her work and the work of BIPA over so many years in promoting British-Irish relations, not just between Britain and Ireland, but between the devolved Assembly of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and of course the Crown Dependencies, the Isle of Man, Jersey and Guernsey. Sunday is an important day for me because it's my birthday on St Patrick's Day. My great-grandparents were Dempseys and O'Learys, and if I may, if the Right Honourable Lady would indulge me just for a moment, I would like to pay tribute to the schools and churches in my constituency, St Mary's Roman Catholic Church and St Mary's in Hornchurch, St Peter's Roman Catholic School and St Edward's Roman Catholic Church in Romford, and also St Patrick's School in Collier Row and Corpus Christi, as well as the Iona Club, which is somewhere where people of Irish ancestry go to socialise and meet people in the local community. So I'm very proud of my Irish links, the Irish connections within Romford, and I very much look forward to continuing to working with her and all members of this House to ensure that we promote strong British-Irish relations going forward.
Can I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and he's absolutely right to pay tribute to all the schools and churches that help to promote the Irish identity in his constituency, and also again I thank him for the work on BIPA that he was so devoted and dedicated to for so many years. So the British Irish Parliamentary Board was in place. It was just the Oireachtas and Westminster, and the 98 agreement happened. And in the agreement itself, there is a line that says that maybe there could be a body to shadow the new British Irish Council. Perhaps it says along the lines of the British Irish Parliamentary Body. Now, the body took the hint, and by 2005 had become the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly, and as my honourable friend has said, not just the Oireachtas and Westminster, but expanded to include all the legislatures in the British Isles. So all the devolved parliaments and the parliaments in Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man, exactly mirroring the British Irish Council, and we would be delighted, I must say to the Minister, if BIPA could have more of a role in scrutinising the British Irish Council, because we feel that we would be the perfect body to be able to discuss what the BIC is debating and bring a parliamentary aspect to that work. One of the things that the Assembly is able to do, unlike any other body, is it was able during the times we've not had government in Stormont to give a voice to the MLAs who are members of the Assembly. Because of the way it is constituted and the history, members of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly remain members even if their Parliament isn't sitting. And that's meant that MLAs have had a voice on BIPA throughout all the periods of suspension of the Stormont Assembly. And I must pay tribute to Steve Aitken, who serves on the steering committee and is now the new deputy speaker in Stormont. But he has been able to attend every one of our assemblies, all our steering committees, despite the fact that Stormont wasn't sitting, and bring the voice, not just him but other MLAs, bring the voice of Northern Ireland to the debates. Incredibly important. I also want to just very quickly touch on a plenary that we held in March last year, which was to mark the 25th anniversary of the agreement. It was just before St Patrick's Day, because as everybody knows, if there is any event that's going to happen around St Patrick's Day, you can forget anybody from Ireland being there, because they'll all be enjoying the celebrations either in Washington or Dublin or London or Chicago or Boston or all the other places which put on the most magnificent St Patrick's Day events. But we had a wonderful meeting, and we were able, with kind permission of the then Speaker Alex Maskey, to actually use the Stormont Assembly Chamber chamber. And it was very special because it was using a building that hadn't been used for many months at that point. And we were very grateful to have been addressed by Bertie Ahern, who, as Taoiseach, of course, was the Taoiseach at the time of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. So John Holmes, who had been Principal Private Secretary to John Major and Tony Blair. To Kate Fearon, Brona Hines, Dr Avila Kilmurray and Jane Morris, who were all members of the Women's Coalition. And that was an incredible session because the voice of the women who had been instrumental in bringing about the agreement was so powerful and really resonated with everyone who was there. And finally, by Johnny Byrne from Ulster University, who reflected on the achievements of policing under the agreement and the work still left to do. Now, what we do on BIPRA is we discuss policy issues. We discuss those areas that are relevant to all of us: housing, tourism, sovereign matters. We discuss defence. We discuss energy provision. Reports are issued by our committees on a very regular basis, and they are very in-depth technical policy discussions. They are well worth reading because they touch on many, many aspects of our shared policy concerns and also suggestions and recommendations for how things can be different. So I commend the work of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly. It is a fantastic body. I have been very, very honoured to co-chair it for the last 18 months or so, and I'm looking forward to our next plenary in Wicklow, which is coming up in a few weeks' time, just after Easter. And I will finish by wishing everybody a happy St Patrick's Day. It is always a great opportunity to enjoy yourself, and the Irish give us that real chance to have such fun with our friends. Thank you.
Claire Hannah.
Seachtain láfial a fádrug agus fásta seachtain na Gaeilge, cockíist go dhéanamh ar fud an dó na hagin Fally den culture tanga agus Edria Coloru agus Maishiv Gachnamal Egusoj na couple of focal. It's also, as well as being St Patrick's Week, it's Seachtain na Gaeilge, an opportunity everywhere to use the Irish language and to celebrate Irish language and culture. So well done to all of the members who have used their couple of focal in the chamber today. It's a pleasure to speak and to follow members across the House who've done so much to honour and deepen the fabric of, deepen the contribution of the Irish to Britain, and who have represented the Irish in Britain for years with inclusivity and confidence and brilliant stories. I am proudly a Belfast woman and a Belfast MP, but I am a native of Galway. I was born there, so next time I'm down, I'll have a look around for the members' ancestors. We know that it wasn't always an easy landing for people who arrived in Britain from Ireland, including my own parents who came to this city in their younger years, and many faced isolation and discrimination when they got here, but many also, when they arrived in Britain, found refuge, found acceptance, and they found opportunities that they hadn't found in Ireland. And it is a fact that, to our shame, in many cases, Ireland pushed people out because maybe they were pregnant, or because they were gay, because there was no work for them, or because otherwise they didn't fit. And many of those unwanted people found opportunities and found acceptance here, often found social democracy here, and for that we're very grateful. Of course, those people found a good home in Ireland, but they have also done so much to make it a good home for many other people as well. And across all classes of work and vocation and talent, Irish people are succeeding in sectors as diverse as construction traditionally, but the health service and the arts and sports. And so successful are they that, in fact, many times commentators in the media claim them as British. But I'm happy to confirm that Cillian Murphy is definitively ours this week after his Oscar win. We are many things, but the island of Ireland is a global cultural superpower, and we're very happy to share that, but be a bit possessive of it as well. The Irish in Britain and the Irish-British relationship is also a critical part of the ethos of the Good Friday Agreement, and nurturing that strand through three architecture is a really important part of our role here, participating in Westminster, and something we take very seriously. It's not a secret that I and my party aspire to a new agreed and reconciled Ireland. Through our New Ireland Commission, we've published a set of principles, 6 principles that we hope will guide this conversation over the years and the decades to come. They're around reconciliation and empathy, around embracing diversity, being outward-looking, being hopeful and honest. But the deep integration of Irish people here and the way they cherish and entwine their Irish and their British identity is a model and a level of maturity that I think Irish nationalism should aspire to and emulate. The Northern Irish in particular are really moving on from traditional binaries and really embracing the or both provisions of the Good Friday Agreement, feeling they don't have to choose between their Irishness and their Britishness, and I say more power to their elbow for that. The violent years before the Good Friday Agreement did drive a wedge between people and communities, obviously in Northern Ireland, but here as well, and between Britain and Ireland, and we're all still working hard to bridge that. But it's precisely because of those painful parts of our shared past that we really have to work to deepen and embed our friendship and our neighbourliness and to put that cycle of mistrust into the past. Wherever we may go in the years and decades to come, it is very clear that a confident, strong and pluralist Britain is in Ireland's interests and vice versa. We live in the shadow and the shelter of each other. Michael D. Higgins has rightly been quoted this afternoon. He said that through our improved relationships as equals and friends, the Irish and the British can embrace the best versions of each other. The Irish in Britain do that every day, and I'm really pleased, particularly because of the turbulence of the past, to pay tribute to them. Gur míle maith agah, agus lá fiail fádra tháinig Daoibh go léir. Thank you, and happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Mark Logan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And before, I haven't actually prepared a speech, and I was just assuming I would be the only Irish accent speaking in today's debate, but then the good member from Belfast South has chipped in there. I can't do Irish apart from Conas a Tattoo. I could do Ulster Scots, but same thing. I did. I'm glad to see my friend, the Minister of State, here today, because I know a year ago I did try to put him on the spot by asking him to say a bit of Ulster Scots, and he went a bit red during that APPG event on Northern Ireland. I also asked his very good civil servants, again not to put them on the spot right now, who are the most famous Irish people in Britain right now, because I was thinking of people, like from the past, Terry Wogan, Graham Norton, Darragh O'Brien, and then they said 2 or 3 names that I'd never heard of them before, and I must be getting old. So they were for the younger people, more fashionable these days. But it's very obvious that the contribution that Irish have made on Great Britain has been absolutely massive. Absolutely well. Thank you.
Friend for giving way. He mentioned the incredible contribution the Irish people have made to Great Britain and the United Kingdom and all of the islands that we share. But would he also agree the Irish people have given enormous amount of support and contribution to the Commonwealth? The Irish ancestry is all around the Commonwealth. In fact, St. Patrick's Day, which we celebrate Montserrat, is a British overseas territory. They too will be celebrating St. Patrick's Day on Sunday as their patron saint. So does he agree with me that it would be wonderful to see Ireland become the next member of the Commonwealth of Nations?
Thank you very much for the information from my honourable friend from Rumford. And indeed, he was hiding his Irish ancestry over the last 4.5 years too. I had no idea there were Dempseys in the family going back, and I know he's very passionate when it comes to the issue of the Commonwealth, and I may sort of get a bit of slippy shoulders on this and divert that question to the Minister of State if he fancies taking that one up. But it's an incredibly interesting idea, and I think the Irish influence across the whole of these islands, across the Commonwealth, and indeed across the world, as we see, especially when it comes to the United States, and the number of US presidents that have some form of Irish or indeed Ulster Scots heritage. I think of my own neck of the woods in County Antrim, North Antrim, where I was born in the townland of Moneydulloch, halfway between Houseofcommons and Cullybackey, and indeed the President Chester Arthur, who was actually the first Burfer president, as in people at the time didn't think he was actually born in the United States. And his parents were both born approximately 3 fields across from where I grew up, and other presidents like Andrew Jackson and indeed Buchanan over in Donegal direction. So the influence has been massive. But I was drawn to what also my honourable friends, the former Secretary of State said about not sure about the impact of the diaspora, the Irish diaspora in her constituency, but the Irish in Britain have a wonderful website, and if you go to that website, you can hover over every constituency in the UK, and it tells you the number of Irish passport holders, or those who identify as Irish, in each constituency. And my constituency in Bolton North East, next door to Salford, give or take a constituency, we have roughly 1,000 constituents who have an Irish passport. And you might think that's not significant, but when you have a majority of 378, that could make a big difference for me in the election come November time or later in the year. And obviously, I'm not doing this because of votes at the ballot box. That's not why we're here today. But their contribution has been massive, and I even think of you mentioned the construction. Sorry, the right honourable member mentioned the construction industry, and there's a gentleman, and I make a full disclosure, Dr. John Kennedy, who's from just outside Greater Manchester. He lives in Cheshire, but he was born in Mayo. And he came across, a story sometimes when he told me the story, it felt a bit like Angela's Ashes. And he spoke about how him and one of his siblings and his mother had travelled to the United States, but his sibling sadly passed away during that time of hardship. And when he returned to Mayo at the time, he said in the 1950s, 60s, he said there was no jobs. And so he had to make his way to London. And when he got to London, he said, at the time he had no skills, but he said on day one, he got up and he said, I'm going to work harder than every single person around me, and I'm going to put my head down and make something of myself. And so he started off by cleaning, and then after a year or two, he set up his own cleaning company, and it all snowballed, where eventually he ended up with a construction company. And his construction company, I think, was sold about 20 years ago for roughly £100 million, give or take 20 million, I might be off there a bit, Minister of State, but he sold that for a colossal sum. And he actually was involved in the Good Friday Belfast Agreement in 1998 because his construction company produced one of the commemorative articles for that. So I just pay testament to him and the hundreds and thousands of others who have contributed so much to British society. And a disclosure as well, financial declaration of interest. He has given me a couple of £100 for my political campaign, I think last year or the year before as well. Also, I thought it was quite interesting, the honourable member for Salford and Eccles had referred to some of the discrimination in the past. Indeed, I was just reading through the Bolton News that spoke about how in the mid-19th century that when there was a plague or disease of sort hitting the town of Bolton, the Irish community were blamed for bringing this disease across, and there was a lot of taboo and a lot of scare about the other at the time. And indeed, whenever I came to my constituency and to represent Bolton North East as MP in 2019, a lot of I'm very proud, like the Minister of State is also to represent one of the largest Muslim communities amongst Conservative MPs in the country, predominantly Gujarati, Indian Muslim. And to this day, nearly every time I go to my mosques in Bolton North East, they'll often tell me about how their fathers or their grandfathers, when they first came to this country, that they felt a deep affinity with the Irish because sometimes they had also suffered from those feelings of discrimination. So again, during this period of Ramadan as well, I'd like to pay tribute to that particular community in Bolton North East. And then finally, just on UK-Ireland relations, I think there was a great point raised about how the Irish consulate has just opened up the last couple of 3 years in Manchester and serving the whole of the north of England. That's great to see because obviously during the Brexit years, I think the bilateral relationship between the United Kingdom and Ireland hit many bumps. I think it was a very difficult time, and there was a huge decrease in trust actually between two sides. And we saw that a couple of years ago at the British-Irish Association event in Oxford, where there was a real asymmetry, and I would call more to colleagues on this side of the Irish Sea is a real asymmetry in the understanding of one another, because in Ireland, or in the Republic of Ireland, everyone's very well schooled in terms of who our cabinet is and our policies and whatever else. But sometimes you feel at this side that there's a lot more homework that we could be doing in what is one of the closest nations, peoples and cultures to the United Kingdom on this planet as well. So I will finish on that, and so just again to thank everyone, all the Irish lovers as well, whoever loves the Irish people across the whole of the United Kingdom, and have a wonderful St Patrick's Day as well. From someone from Ballymena originally, where obviously the great St Patrick spent many a year. We had an argument in the APPG for Ireland and the Irish in Britain, because I said he spent more time in Ballymena than any other part, but we had a Welsh colleague said no, he was in Wales longer, with someone in Downpatrick said he was there longer, but I can assure you he spent most of his life in Slemish, looking over the sea. Oh, you can't, not Romford, it can't possibly also be Romford.
He mentions Wales. It was wonderful to see the flag of Wales flying from the flagpoles in New Palace Yard. Westminster Abbey will fly the flag of St Patrick this weekend for St Patrick's Day. I hope he will urge the Minister to ensure that government buildings fly the Cross of St Patrick to represent all Irish people, north and south, for the day of their patron saint on the 17th of March.
Thank you very much for that, Commissioner. I absolutely agree, and what a great way to finish.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to celebrate your Chairship today on a fantastic debate we're having so far, and congratulations to my honourable friend, the member for Salford and Eccles, and the member for Staffordshire Moorlands for securing it today. There have been some excellent comments and speeches so far about the immeasurable impact of the Irish diaspora across the whole of the UK. I want to focus my remarks on the enormous contribution that our Irish diaspora has made to Luton over many decades. And in fact, in many ways, I said to my colleague when I came in, many times I've been asked where I'm from. And I say, Luton. And they say, but where are you really from? But that's, I'll come on to that a little bit later in my speech. Luton's benefited immensely over the years from Irish immigration post-World War II, particularly in the generations of settled Irish diaspora. The 2021 census found that 3% of Luton identify as white Irish, which is over 3 times the England and Wales average. The positive impact has crossed all aspects of life in Luton, with a work hard, play hard approach to life, I might suggest. And I reflect on my friend's comments regarding many trade union leaders and their Irish descent. And indeed, I pay my tribute to many local trade union representatives in Luton who also come from Irish descent. And maybe that understanding of community and solidarity plays out in the work that they do as those representatives. But growing up in Luton, I personally feel I've benefited immensely for having friends from the Irish diaspora, many who I met at Luton Sixth Form College after they joined from Cardinal Newman's School. Their parents came over from Ireland to England to work and work hard, many building roads and houses or working at Luton's Vauxhall plant, some meeting at the Galtymore and then wanting to settle down and moving out to Luton. And my friends from the second generation Irish community also worked hard, many being the first to go to university, others becoming skilled tradesmen, electricians and carpenters, running their own businesses. But everyone worked hard, which also led to everyone playing hard once the end of the week arrives and being up for the crack. I first experienced and learned what the crack was in the summer after my A-levels, the Italia 90 World Cup, the first Football World Cup championships that Ireland reached. And watching Ireland play Italy in the quarter-finals in the Painters' Arms, and even though Ireland lost, the party carried on, including at the Mad Hatter's nightclub with Irish tricolours flying high and singing and dancing into the small hours. So understanding the crack is even when you lose, you still have a party. And while sport is just one of the cultural influences of the Irish diaspora in Luton, and whether it's been some of my friends playing football for St Joseph's back in the day, or the next generation of young women playing for the Cladogales Gaelic football team today in Luton, for me, the musical influence of the Irish community in Luton has enriched our town immensely. And in preparing this speech, I was reminded by my good friends Mick and Trish about their talents on the fiddle and piano accordion, respectively, as teenagers. But they had to admit that they weren't a patch on their younger sister Claire, who won the All-Ireland Championship for under-12s on the banjo and mandolin back in 1985. Irish music and watching bands has been a staple part of our cultural offer and nightlife in Luton. Back in the 90s, we'd be sure to go if Poison the Pachine were playing, and many more bands over the years, be it the Whiskey Preachers or Kell, and indeed recently Missing the Ferry. Songs of humour and sorrow, a commentary of life, building on the storytelling of traditional Irish folk songs passed down the generations. And of course, music and singing is not just confined to Sundays at Our Lady, the Holy Ghost, or Sacred Heart, or St Margaret's, but more often at many of our fantastic pubs, with links close to our Irish community: O'Shea's, the Phoenix, the Sugarloaf, the Globe, the Bailey, the Wheelies, the Painters, my friend Marie's pub, the Gardeners, and of course, for some of us of a certain age, the long ago Club Erin and Eddie's Bar. Real focus of community and solidarity, and we still frequent them much now. And where music and a pub are involved, there's usually a dance to be had. And it's right that I celebrate the success of many Irish dancers and many Irish dancing clubs in Luton, particularly Finbar Conway and his Academy of Irish Dancing, which has produced many Great Britain Irish dancing champions, as well as representatives who've made it to the World Championships on a regular basis. But a key institution in Luton that must be celebrated in this debate is Luton Irish Forum. And I want to particularly thank them all for their outstanding work on behalf of the Irish diaspora in Luton. Noelette, the Chief Executive, Tom Scanlon, the Chair, and of course the executive team, all the staff and the regular volunteers who do a brilliant job as part of the charity, promoting Irish identity, culture, heritage, and also improving the quality of life of the Irish community and all in Luton. And that means supporting people in need, poverty or distress, but particularly, but not exclusively, of Irish descent. Working in partnership with Luton Council and other voluntary and community sector groups to support our Luton community. And of course, the Luton Irish Forum also advances the education of Irish music, drama, arts and the Irish language. And a key part of this is, of course, the annual Luton St Patrick's Festival. And whether you're Irish or not, it's a leading part of Luton's cultural calendar. And it's brought Irish music, dance, drama to the streets and entertainment venues of Luton, and has grown from strength to strength across the years. And given the way that Luton does celebrate, it was no coincidence that the previous Irish ambassador's final engagement in September 22 was to attend the launch of the documentary of the creation of Luton St Patrick's Day Festival called Paint the Town Green. And indeed, just 6 or so months later, the incoming current ambassador came to Luton and ensured to visit the Luton Irish Forum, where he said that he'd received the best welcome he'd ever had. And at least I would say I was there, the most rousing welcome, with the Emerald Pipe Band piping me in. And so while the St Patrick's Festival is already underway, with many events taking place already, I can't wait to join everyone on Sunday for the 25th Luton St Patrick's Parade. And as a final note, we make much of St Patrick, but in Luton and through the Luton Irish Forum, we celebrate St Bridget. St Bridget is Ireland's female patron saint. And for a number of years, Luton Irish Forum has hosted an annual afternoon tea and celebrated Irish women in sport, Irish women in fashion. And last year, I particularly enjoyed it because it celebrated the achievements of Irish women in the NHS. As of June 2023, over 13,500 members of the NHS staff in England reported their nationality as Irish, and this includes over 2,000 doctors and over 4,000 nurses. And so Luton St Bridget's Day event highlighted the stories of 3 women from our local Irish community: Betty Halfpenny and Rosanna Anderson, who came to the UK to be nurses, and Rosalind Burke, a radiographer. And Rosalind has worked at the Luton Dunstable Hospital for over 50 years. So to conclude, I want to say again that Luton and our country has benefited enormously from our Irish community and the Irish diaspora. We're proud of all the work you've done to enrich and empower our community. And I'm so proud that I'm able to represent everybody as a Member of Parliament for Luton South. So I can't wait for the party on St Patrick's Day on Sunday. Sláinte.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Dame Siobhan. It's a real pleasure to be here under your, you have to have you chairing this debate. And it's a great, I compliment those who brought the debate together. It's important that we do this every year, I think. because for me particularly it's a privilege to represent one of the largest and longest established Irish communities in England, and indeed one of the most talented, from W.B. Yeats to the Pogues. Hammersmith has represented the best of not just literature and music, but many, many different forms of arts and science. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Irish Cultural Centre in Hammersmith, which is rightly recognised as one of the centres of Irish culture in the UK. And I pay tribute to the current team, William Foote, the director, Ross Scanlon, the artistic director, and Peter Power-Hines, who's the chair of trustees. And it's rather invidious of going back over the 30 years that the centre has existed to name people, but I can't not name David O'Keefe, the previous director, who sadly died tragically young in 2019, Ivan Gibbons and Hilda McCafferty, Mary Walker, people who have made it a lasting success. And last but not least, I mentioned Jim O'Hara, who for 13 years was the chair of trustees. The centre runs a brilliant arts programme all the year round, particularly in St Patrick's Day week and indeed in St Bridget's week as well. And that's not just music and culture and theatre, it's also painting. You should go to the centre, if only to see the paintings illustrating the text of Ulysses, which are fantastic and are a day out in themselves, and one of the best libraries of Irish books in the country. And just to prove that it's not just an administrative task, a couple of weeks ago I went to see the fantastic play by Brian Field called The Lovers, that some may be familiar with, and William, the director of the theatre, was starring in that, and Ros, the artistic director, was directing that. And a lot of what we do there is homegrown. So on Friday afternoons, it's music sessions, Friday afternoons and evenings. Anybody can come along with an instrument and join in. That's an open invitation to members present, but it's surprisingly melodic and harmonious. So maybe check yourselves really, check your level of ability, because it is fantastic. But you can just, any member of the public can wander in there, just sit and 3 or 4 hours every Friday and listen to some of the most beautiful Irish music. And that's fantastic. But I just want to say these things don't happen by accident. And my association goes back to when we first commissioned and built the Irish Centre back in the early 1990s. I was deputy leader of the council, and it was a project of principally the then leader of the council, Ian Coleman, who was my predecessor as MP for Hammersmith and Fulham, and also Councillor Sean Redding there. And that was a time of austerity as well, but they found the site, they found the money, they put it together, they built the Irish Centre there. It was opened by the then Taoiseach Dick Spring, and it was hugely successful. But unfortunately, it didn't survive. For political reasons I won't go into, the site was going to be sold. And then a group of people who just wanted it to survive came together. And that included, in the end, the local authority, led by Stephen Cowan, Shepherd's Bush Housing Association, then led by Paul Doe, to buy the site and to knock down the existing centre and to build an even better centre that's there today, with about 5 floors of social housing on top of it. And it's a real tribute to the community that all came together in the way it did. But the key party to that happening was the Irish Embassy and the Irish government, who even during a time of great austerity were able to find the resources to support that. And I really want to pay tribute, not just to Martin Fraser, the current ambassador, but to his predecessors as well, for everything that they have done to support Irish culture and the Irish diaspora in the UK. They really understand the importance of that, and not just paying lip service to it, but putting their money and their resources and their enthusiasm there. So I hope that will long continue, and we've had the privilege of welcoming a number of Irish Prime Ministers, Deputy Prime Ministers, Cabinet Ministers there, and I think we will again this week. So I'm indulging myself a little bit here, Dave Siobhan, because this is a very important institution, not just for the Irish community, but the whole community, and not just in Hammersmith, but in West London. And I'll finish by just touching on one other aspect, which is my seat is changing. I'm keeping Hammersmith, but if I'm successful in the next election, gaining Chiswick. And there are many links between Hammersmith and Chiswick. One of them is Yates. And again, anybody who hasn't done this should go on the Yates Walk, which begins in Hammersmith and takes you on a journey down the river and into Chiswick, because Yates lived for a number of years in Bedford Park and composed some of his most famous work while he was living there. The Chiswick 8 is the model for the Lake Isle of Innisfree. That's my contention. I'm not sure that everybody would necessarily agree with me, but that is certainly what we believe in West London. And Cahill Dalit, who himself is a very well-respected poet, has championed the cause of Yeats. We not only have the Yeats Walk now, we not only have a wonderful sculpture called In Wrought Light, and people recognise the literary reference there in the grounds of St Michael's Church. But we also have the Yeats app. So you can have an app and you can go around and visit all the sites that Yeats made famous or are famous as part of his life there. It's something that we treasure. It's a hugely important part of our culture. It's great that some of the greatest artists in the world have come and shared that with us in West London, but that is just so typical of the Irish diaspora and the joy that it has brought, as well as the talent across the world. And that's what we should pay tribute to today.
Martin Doherty-Hughes.
Cahirlig Taplet, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be participating in this debate, which has been secured by the member for Salford and Eccles, and thank them for gaining it. We were talking earlier on that we seemingly are in the pull-out of the Irish Post today. Won't do me any harm, I'm sure the member for Bolton North East will think. And it reminded me of a story the last time that we had this debate, actually in the Chamber, which was, of course, gained by our friend, the late member for Rochdale, who we miss from this debate today. And I was telling the member for Salford and Eccles that, and also the minister, that we had the debate, and by the time I'd get home to tell my dad in Clydebank, that we were actually in the Donegal news. That debate was headlines in Donegal, and my dad was sitting there with his wee dog, Sandy, no longer of this world, may she rest in peace, and he just folded out his newspaper and he went, "Yeah, I know," and he was reading the Donegal news. Needless to say, that had arrived the day previous by the bus from Donegal town to Clydebank, so I was beat by that, I have to say. So I was delighted to participate in today's debate. I'm very mindful of when Uachtar and Éireann addressed the Parliament of Scotland actually back in 2016, because the relationship between Ireland and Scotland is familial. It is ancient. And he stated that the bonds of kinship and history between our peoples are woven thick, finding expression today in a deep affection and empathy between Irish and Scots wherever our paths cross. Ours is a friendship which I deeply value, as I know you do. You might even say that given our shared and complex history, it's often been difficult to say where ends and where begins, or the other way round. I have to say, I totally agree. Now, also, given my name is probably one of the longest in Parliament, Marcin Sean O'Doherty Go Haid, again, it would be remiss of me not to stand up here and to speak on behalf not only of my party but my constituents who are part of the Irish diaspora. At the All-Party Parliamentary Group AGM the other day, and I think the member for Bolton North East mentioned it, we were all arguing about our connections to St Patrick. Now, if the Westminster process is something to which I can use to trump everybody, my early day motion, I think back in about 2018, is very clear that St Patrick came from the village of Old Kilpatrick in West Dunbartonshire, which of course was an ancient Roman fort at the western fringes of the Antonine Wall, and it had clear consensus from every party in the chamber, even the member for Strongford, who sadly is not with us today. And that also brings me on. As I say to him often, I'm a proud Ulsterman. My family's deep roots are in County Donegal. And Donegal, along with Cavan and the Republic, are parts of the ancient province of Ulster. And I have no shame in that, and I think it's important for those of us of not only that traditional Ulster notion, but also the Scots-Irish and the Ulster Scots to be very proud of that mixed, complex, and yes, sometimes difficult history. Because it can be difficult, I have to say, sometimes to have a St. Patrick's Day in parts of the United Kingdom. Still is. And to be vocal about your Irish heritage is sometimes looked down upon. And we have to challenge that for a range of reasons so that we see beyond what has been in the past. And I think it was actually the member for Belfast South who talked about how these islands were looked at as somewhere more progressive, social democracy. As an openly member of the LGBT community, I know what that's all about. And it was therefore a great boon, I think, for many of us to see the Irish Republic specifically push forward with issues around the Constitution and having constitutional debates and also referenda on the right to equal marriage. Equal marriage. Not same-sex, equal marriage. And to see that actually visibly happen was extraordinary. People like myself, coming from a very openly Irish Catholic background, never thought that would ever happen. I'm also wearing, I think I'd maybe say a wee bit more about my historic links, which I mentioned previously, but I want to maybe concentrate a wee bit more on Donegal and on Ulster specifically. The links, yeah, I will. I'll give them away to the Right Honourable Lady.
I'm so grateful to give you away because he's making such important points around how progressive these islands have been. And one of the shared histories that we have is, of course, the fighting in World War I, and particularly the Battle of the Somme. And would he agree with me that that moment in 2016, where the Irish ambassador laid a wreath at the cenotaph for the first time ever, joining other ambassadors and high commissioners, was so significant and really a step forward in the relations between the two countries?
Well, I think Right Honourable Lady actually stole a bit of my thunder, because I totally agree, and for a very specific reason. The complexity of our relationships. I go back to my other family in County Mayo, in the province of Connaught, where my great-uncle James fell the week before the armistice was signed when he was a part of the King's Regiment of Scotland, whereas his brother was in the Irish Republican Army. Two very different sides of a very complex constitutional history. So I very much agree, and it was also followed, I think, for many years now, where I think it's either the senior minister or the Taoiseach himself lay a wreath in Enniskillen, which is, I think, it shows how far we have progressed. But when it comes back to the personal connection, I'm just kind of maybe keep me on time, Caherla, is that when I did a DNA check a couple of years ago, I said to my dad, "What do you want for your Christmas? And how about a DNA check?" "Aye, all right, why not, you know?" Well, I wish I hadn't. My dad's got cousins in Beijing, Alaska. It's just extraordinary. I think he's related to technically 35,000 people across the planet, all going back to like fourth cousins. But what I did note is it was this guy in Letterkenny specifically who came over for a commemoration of the Clydebank Blitz, which of course is this week, in which the Irish diaspora in Clydebank played a huge part in rebuilding shipping and also the war effort after the Second War in my hometown. But the link is that the then Mayor of Letterkenny, Jimmy Kavanagh, who is a councillor in County Donegal, Jimmy came to this extraordinary orchestral movement which was commissioned for the anniversary, the 80th anniversary. And Jimmy and I were talking about, we're the same height, kind of familiar looking. He's got more hair than me, I have to say, and we laughed that we could be related. And he says, "Where's your dad's family from?" I says, "Well, my granddad's from Stirlingford, and between Letterkenny and Convent." And he said, "My mother's a daughter, that's where she's from." Needless to say, doing the DNA check, Jimmy Kavanagh is my dad's second cousin. His mum, who is sadly now past at 101, is my dad's full cousin. Extraordinary. But the reason we had lost connection with our Donegal family for very specific reasons, so many of them left, I think has been alluded to in this debate, because of poverty. And maybe if I can be a critical friend in this sense, we have talked about, I think, the Great Hunger. I think we need to be very clear about history, because it impacted the province of Ulster specifically, and also in the whole west of Ireland. The famine was the impact of a political decision. And it's just a reality. And we have come so far to rectify that, and also to see the island of Ireland, the whole island of Ireland, now reach a population which now exceeds that of 1845, which is a remarkable turnaround for a country or an island which saw 1 million people die and 1 million leave. And I have to say, I'm still glad, though, that they came to Clydebank, and also to places like Dumbarton and the Vale of Leven, to work in places like John Brown's Shipyard or Denny's of Dumbarton or their Turkey Red Dye in the Vale of Leven. Their participation in that industrial revolution, those workers' participation should be commemorated. And that's why I'm wearing this tie. It's the Royal Mail ship, the Queen Mary, and the participation in that construction, but also had a negative impact, not only on them, but on all the workers around them through conditions such as asbestos, mesothelioma, and how many of the Irish diaspora who came to Scotland suffered from the infamy of asbestos-related conditions. Again, today we celebrate or commemorate the 100th anniversary of the first person to be ever diagnosed with that death, Nellie Kinsale, who died of asbestos-related conditions 100 years ago. Maybe if I want to draw my thoughts to an end, I'm very mindful of those ordinary Irish, not the well-known folk, not those who make names through the music industry or arts or big business, but I'm mindful of people like Rita Dawson, who's a nun in the Sisters of Charity, based in Clydebank, my constituency. She's been there for nearly 40 years. And she has led St Margaret's of Scotland Hospice through thick and thin. She has been a leader for the palliative care community, not just in Scotland, but across the whole of these islands. She's not only chief executive of that organisation, but she's been a board member, I think, of St Joseph's Hospice in Hackney, I believe. Also in Lanarkshire to the St Andrews Hospice there. I want to pay special mention of Rita Dawson's faith and commitment to my community as an Irish woman who feels at home and works cross-community in every sense of Scottish community, who no matter who you are, no matter what God you worship, no matter the person you marry, her leadership has made sure that the voice of good palliative care and end-of-life support has been second to none, not only in West Dumbartonshire, but to build on that across the whole of Scotland. Let me conclude by saying that I'm also mindful that in Scotland we seem to have maybe fallen back when it comes to Irish clubs, and maybe that's because we just know we're Irish or Scottish and it really doesn't make any difference, that we haven't really needed a lot of those support clubs. But we used to have them. I'm mindful of the Remelton Club in Linvale, in my own hometown, and that's why I have decided to work with others like Danny McCafferty to create the first Dumbartonshire Irish Trust to cover my constituency and the old county of Dumbartonshire, so we can reconnect with that diversity, that complexity, and celebrate St Patrick as he was. He wasn't a Protestant, he wasn't a Catholic, he was a Christian. He was an old Celtic Christian who was forceful and whose history is as complex as anybody else's. And his foundation of Iona itself, and I will come to a conclusion, his foundation of the Abbey of Iona stretched beyond these islands. That the modern Christian church only exists today because Patrick of the province of Ulster and his missionaries maintained the fabric of civilization in what some people called the Dark Ages. If it wasn't for people like him, we probably wouldn't be sitting here today. And I am delighted that as an ancestor of Nail of the Nine Hostages, with all the complexity of that history, to participate in the debate today and to speak on behalf of my colleagues from the Scottish National Party.
Anderson.
Thank you, Dame McDonagh. How pleasurable it is to serve under your chairship. How apposite that you are the chair for this wonderful celebration of the Irish diaspora in the UK. And happy St Patrick's Day to everyone contributing and to listening in as well. St Patrick himself a traveller between these isles, just as we are celebrating those people who have travelled between these isles. And I thank my honourable friend, the member for Salford and Eccles, and the Right Honourable Member for Staffordshire Moorlands, for bringing forward this debate and giving us this opportunity. I also thank the many members that have turned out today and spoken so eloquently, demonstrating so much understanding of the vital Irish contribution to life in our own constituencies and across the UK. And I would echo so many tributes
to Tony Lloyd, who I sat with in December for the last speech that he gave here in this very hall, sitting in the chair just behind me. And I think of him every time I'm in here, as I'm sure we all do as well. I'd like to thank the member for Salford and Eccles for celebrating so many achievements of the Irish diaspora: business, cultural, political, trade union and scientific life. What a great list she gave us of Irish champions, and of life as a second generation, checking your identity all the time, which I absolutely understand, and her praise for the Irish Post. And the member for Staffordshire Moorlands, speaking of the honour of being the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, I am also honoured to be the Shadow Minister for Northern Ireland. It is an honour, and I do receive a fantastically warm welcome every time I visit, and for telling us so much and championing the work of the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly.
On her, but I'm very grateful to her. I realised in my remarks that I failed to mention my co-chair, Brendan Smith TD, who is an absolute champion for the British-Irish relationship, and it would be remiss of me if I allowed the debate to finish without putting his name on record.
Glad you're able to set the record straight. And I think there's a lot of work that goes on by British parliamentarians with Irish politicians as well that goes unnoticed by many. So I'm really glad of that opportunity to hear so much about the work of the Assembly. And I'd like to thank the member for Belfast South for speaking in Irish, but acknowledging the painful parts of our shared past as well, but also the strength of our shared lives that we have built together. And the member for Luton for her celebration of the contribution of the Irish diaspora in Luton and an encyclopedic knowledge of Luton clubs, and a special member for the Irish dancers and the Luton Irish Forum. Just as the member for Hammersmith also praised the Hammersmith Irish Centre and highlighted the role of the Irish Embassy and all that they have done to contribute to the role of the Irish diaspora here and to strengthen our communities living alongside each other. I think that the rugby last weekend really stretched good relations between England and Ireland to their limits, but I'm glad that the Irish contribution to British life is being fully demonstrated at Cheltenham as we speak. In England and Wales, in the census of 2021, 362,000 people identified as Irish, either solely or in combination with a UK national identity. 299,500 people identified solely as Irish, and 324,000 were born in the Republic of Ireland. But that diminishes the actual numbers of probably about 5 million people, as has been said, with Irish family connections across the country. Our two countries share so much history, culture, ideas, politics and people. This story runs like a thread through these aisles and through the lives of so many families, including my own. My grandmother came from Temple Moyle in Northern Ireland, and I'm married to a proud London Irishman. My father-in-law came to London from Sligo in 1962. He's a carpenter and a builder. He's worked hard, as so many others have alluded to. And my mother-in-law came to Doncaster from Donegal, and then moving to Glasgow and then to London as a nurse. She came over in 1959. They met at a dance in London and married in a double wedding with Nora's sister in St Mary's in Clapham. They've brought up their 6 children in southwest London, and their contribution to my life and that of their church, their whole community and our whole family is immeasurable. They have 20 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild, and I think it's the lives of them and so many like them that we are celebrating today. They built a bright future, a truly shared heritage. They are an immigration success story, and I'm very proud to be part of their London Irish family. And I'd like to pay particular tribute to the Irish centres across the country that have been family, welfare support, a place to meet, make friends, have a place to stay, to dance, to celebrate, to organise, and just to feel at home. Many have closed, as has been mentioned earlier, with a special mention to the Plunket Club in Clapham South. But I'd like to thank and celebrate several London centres, those in Wimbledon, Camden, Bexley-Heath, Haringey, Lewisham, and, as has been mentioned, in Hammersmith, and to all who run them, to all who go to them, and have ensured their success in our communities. And the Mayor of London has taken this to the next level with his annual St Patrick's Day Festival and Parade, which is which deserves a special mention and will be enjoyed by hundreds of thousands of people this weekend. People proudly going out to be a little bit Irish for a one day only, joining in with the celebrations and watching or taking part in the parade. And we're all happy and thankful to do that. And I think that says a lot about how well the Irish diaspora are integrated into our country. On her historic visit to Ireland in 2011, Queen Elizabeth II spoke powerfully of the ties of family, friendship and affection being the lifeblood of the partnership across these islands, and how right she was. The tapestry makes up our civic, cultural, political and social lives, and we would be immeasurably poorer without the strong influence of everything Irish. It has not, however, been a benign history, for our relationship over the centuries has seen terrible wrongs which should be acknowledged, with great violence and revolution, but that thread has remained in place and has found new expression in recent years in ways that would have seemed unimaginable to us in the past. We have to pay tribute to everyone who's consciously built that peace over time. Sadly, in recent years, UK-Ireland relations have become strained, including over the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which the government thankfully halted after the Windsor Framework was signed, and now over the Legacy Act. But in government, Labour will reset our relationship with our closest and most important neighbour. Ireland and the United Kingdom must get on for the sake of both its people, and we in Labour will work hard towards that end. I'd also like to take this opportunity to reaffirm Labour's support for the Honourable Member for Belfast East's bill, which would establish a separate standalone route to British citizenship for Irish nationals born after 1948 who've been resident in Northern Ireland and hence the UK for significant periods of time. Over our two countries, we share a unique bond, and I believe this bill honours that. But lastly, I'd like to thank everyone again who's taken part in this debate, and I wish everyone a very, very happy St Patrick's Day, and I hope you all celebrate appropriately. Thank you.
Minister Steve Baker.
Well, Mr Sharma, I'm absolutely delighted to serve under your chairmanship. But alas, that not every debate in this House inspires the same spirit of collegiality and a shared celebration as this debate. And I think it's a sign of the quality and pleasure of this debate that Dame Siobhan has stayed in the chamber to listen to the rest of it. So, of course, I'm very grateful to her for chairing the earlier part of the debate. It's a real joy for me to reply to this debate, and I want to thank the Right Honourable Lady for Salford and Eccles and my Right Honourable friend for Staffordshire Moorlands for securing this timely debate to celebrate St Patrick's Day and celebrate the contribution of the Irish diaspora, which we've heard about so skillfully today. The Honourable Lady began her speech, my opposition shadow, by talking about, if I can find my note, talking about St Patrick being a traveller between these isles. Now, as far as I'm aware, that is my only connection to Ireland, in that I grew up in Cornwall, and of course the Saint's Way from Foy to Padstow was perhaps mythically a route trodden by St Patrick. So, as a Celtic Christian myself, it gives me some pleasure to respond to this debate. I've had the pleasure of travelling to Northern Ireland for some years before my appointment to the department, and so I've been grateful for the opportunity that has provided with me to travel both to Northern Ireland and indeed to the Republic. As the Honourable Lady opposite said, many people are going to get to be just a little bit Irish for one day only, and she's right, of course, that does speak volumes for our integration, and like her, I've been made extremely welcome in Northern Ireland and indeed in the Republic. We're fortunate that we have robust, productive fora for cooperation and dialogue, which we attend alongside the Irish Government. Since I've been in post, I've attended 3 plenary sessions of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly in Cavan, Jersey, and Kildare, and 4 meetings of the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference, as well as the annual British-Irish Association Conference. These fora are absolutely critical to our formal friendship, and so I'd like to turn to the speech of my right honourable friend for Staffordshire Moorlands, and she was absolutely right to pay tribute to our right honourable friend James Brokenshire, and he was, of course, a great Northern Ireland Secretary, and I really recognise what my right honourable friend said, that it is one of the greatest honours to be a Minister for the Northern Ireland Office and for Northern Ireland. And I particularly recognise the welcome that we're extended. And she also mentioned the depth of hope and expectation which is placed upon us. And I think this whole debate, and particularly that contribution, reminds us of the importance of politics and how each of us conducts it. I want to pay tribute to her as co-chair of BIPA. She's made me very welcome. Indeed, she made it very clear to me that if I didn't attend, she'd be making me very unwelcome, probably in the House. But also I want to pay tribute to Brendan Smith, who's made me extremely welcome, and I'm grateful to him for that. I've just realised that I unfortunately skipped lightly past the response I owe the Right Honourable Lady for Salford and Eccles. I really enjoyed listening to her speech, and she was absolutely right to acknowledge the Honourable Lady for Bristol South as a champion of our relationship with Ireland, and she too has given me guidance along the way. Her speech was a remarkable and magisterial survey of the immense contribution of the Irish diaspora to the UK. And I hope she won't mind me saying that I was surprised and very pleased to hear my late Conservative Association President, Sir William McAlpine, cited. And she will understand that as the most Tory of Tories, he would have been both honoured and slightly amused that the Honourable Lady had cited him. So I'm very grateful to her. Tony Lloyd, of course, moved a similar motion in 2022. And I think, as we've heard today, he is much missed on both sides of the House, and no doubt he's also missed on both sides of the Irish Sea. So I congratulate her on a wide-ranging, witty and, if I may say so, touching speech, which I much enjoyed. I'm very grateful in relation to thinking about our new, and if I may say so, already reset relationship with Ireland. I'm very grateful to the former Taoiseach Simon Coveney, to the current Taoiseach Micheál Martin, and to the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar for their continued efforts to improve and to further and to strengthen British-Irish relations over the last few years. Myself and the Secretary of State have put a great deal of effort into that relationship, which I believe has paid dividends. We'll, of course, return to the issue of legacy, which I don't propose to elaborate further today, but it is important that we make progress for the sake of all the people on the island of Ireland and indeed across Great Britain. I'm pleased that that bilateral relationship is strengthening. And I have to say that I agree with Micheál Martin when he has said that it is fundamental to the United Kingdom, fundamental to Ireland, that we have a great relationship, a relationship of equals, and one which we can carry forward in a spirit of family. And so it's to that point that I wish to turn now, because I want to pay tribute to Mr. Martin Fraser, the ambassador from Ireland to the UK. He is a very able statesman and diplomat, and I don't think he'd mind me saying that. And I've enjoyed working with him absolutely immensely. And he is a man of great humour, but also a man of great sincerity. And he stood making a speech on one occasion in the process of resetting our relations through the Windsor Framework. And he said this was always a family dispute. And we were always going to get through it. We were always going to make up. So, I think he was right in that, and it's a theme I'd like to elaborate. So I'd like to say a very deep and heartfelt thank you very much indeed to Mr. Martin Fraser for all that he's done, as well, of course, as making a number of us welcome at the embassy last night for a few halves of Guinness, which some of us are still recovering from. He's also, of course, ably supported by the Deputy Head of Mission, Orla McBreen, and I was grateful that she had attended the earlier part of this debate. I think in the interests of Anglo-Irish relations, I ought not to repeat my claim that the stout produced by the Rebellion Brewery in my constituency is better than Guinness, but possibly it's too late, Mr. Sharma. But I certainly would see this as a family disagreement which has been largely placed behind us, and I think that that is reflected in the spirit of the debate that we have heard today. The peoples of Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have a long shared history which we have heard about, a complex history which has not always been easy. But we have, of course, realised that there's more that we share than that which divides us. It's often said that the Irish never forget our shared history and the English never remember. And alas, that is, I'm afraid, the case. And I just want to put on the record that I'm very grateful to my friend Eamon O'Keefe for his work to help me understand Irish history from the Irish perspective, and he has been a great source of inspiration that this relationship could flourish in the future in a spirit of goodwill, so I'm grateful to him. For many, the route taken from Ireland to the UK has been to seek work and opportunity, particularly in times of hardship, As an engineer myself, I'm struck that many of our greatest civil engineering achievements are a standing monument to the efforts of so many Irish people who built this United Kingdom. The NHS is stronger for the contributions of many Irish nationals who serve here today and have done since its founding. The most recent statistics on this in June 2023 showed that nearly 14,000 members of NHS staff were Irish, including doctors, nurses and support staff. I think it's important to reflect on the great service and sacrifice, as has been done already, of so many Irish people during the First World War, and I too share the admiration for the laying of that wreath, an important moment. Many have remarked that the post-war rebuilding and recovery of Britain would not have been possible without the efforts of Irish hands, and I'm glad to pay tribute to the manifold contributions of the Irish diaspora as part of this debate. I want to turn now to the common travel area, and then that, I think, will be a great context for reflecting on the contributions we've heard from members present. Because the flow of people, energy and ideas between both islands continues unabated. Whether it is to invent, to lead, or to make, we continue to make one another richer in every sense of that word, economically, socially and culturally. This historic close relationship has been enshrined in the common travel area arrangement that's existed for over a century and which is now also protected in statute. This special status enables citizens to live and work freely across both islands. The common travel area provides reciprocal rights to live, to work, to study and to access health and welfare services. These CTA protections reflect the unique nature of life on the island of Ireland. The UK government takes seriously our commitments to protecting and upholding the common travel area. And it's not hyperbole to say that the CTA is central to the UK and Ireland's enduring social and cultural ties. Indeed, in recognition of these close ties, I'm delighted that the government is supporting amendments to the British Citizenship Northern Ireland Bill introduced by the Honourable Member for Belfast East, which would make it easier for people from Ireland resident in the UK to become British citizens. I enjoyed the speech of the Honourable Lady from Belfast South very much indeed. She is an absolutely formidable parliamentarian, as I remember from the first days in this House. She mentioned isolation and discrimination, and it's a sad fact to remember how people were treated in the past. I'm very grateful that things are now very different. She mentioned that Ireland is a global cultural superpower, and of course she's absolutely right. And I hope people will not mind me saying that, of course, Northern Ireland is a crucial part of the overall island's cultural record. She particularly talked about the importance of embracing or both. And, you know, I have seen that at work. It's really important that we should be comfortable in who we are, in our identity, whichever part of the UK we live in, and whatever our identity may be. Which brings me on to my honourable friend for Bolton North East, because he did indeed invite me to speak Ulster Scots, but I have to tell him I'm notorious for my poor language skills. And since I have established a reputation for being able to say Taoiseach, thank goodness I said it right that time, Taoiseach and Taoiseach, I don't think I should spoil my record by attempting any Irish today. But I would say to him that I'll be grateful if he tries to teach me some Ulster Scots later. But he reminded me that I went along to the Discover Ulster Scots Centre, where I met the CEO, Ian Crozier. And I don't think he'd mind me saying that I asked him, what does being Ulster Scots mean to you? And after the only briefest pause, he said everything. Everything. And I could see the feeling that he had. And I think for those of us who perhaps, you know, parents from Hampshire, grew up in Cornwall, no particular sense other than growing up as a child in that place, I think it's important to recognise that for others, their identity is everything. And we should make sure that we respect that identity and we embrace it. And that, as the Honourable Lady for Belfast South said, we make it to be possible for people to be both and. The Honourable Gentleman for Romford, in the course of that speech, made a request that we fly the flag of St Patrick over government buildings. I certainly will consider that request, but I have to tell him I'm afraid I've lost too many friends in unionism already to risk losing any more. The Honourable Lady for Luton South paid tribute to the large diaspora in her constituency, and she explained the crack. And I'm very grateful to her. She said, even when you lose, you still have a party. And I was just wondering, has she been bugging my kitchen table? But I'll leave it to others to work out what I'm getting at. But she mentioned St Bridget, and I'm very grateful to her for prompting me to put on record my admiration for the female leadership that I've seen in Northern Ireland. There's an amazing range of truly inspirational female leaders in Northern Ireland, right across all sections, from promoting social capital and reconciliation between communities through to the highest levels of business. And it's been really humbling and really inspiring to meet those ladies. And so it's right that we remember St Bridget too. The Honourable Gentleman from Hammersmith mentioned the Irish Cultural Centre and reminded us that we can have a good day out to see the paintings illustrating Ulysses. Perhaps the Irish Scots drum might be taken along by my honourable friend for Bolton East. The Honourable Gentleman from Glasgow North told us... I beg your pardon? Glasgow? Oh, good Lord, I'm so sorry. I do beg his pardon. I've got a temporary PPS, Mr. Sharma, but he's become temporary in more than one way. I apologise to the Honourable Gentleman unreservedly, but he made a very good and important speech, and I was grateful to hear it. And I've often stood in Northern Ireland looking across to Donegal, and he reminds me that I should visit. But he made the point about familial and ancient bonds, and of course he's absolutely right. And I think if English MPs have a fault, although they may be few, it's that too rarely do we consider the importance of all parts of this United Kingdom. And I think it's been a reminder through the past few months and years that actually every MP in this House, every MP in this United Kingdom should pay close attention to all parts of the United Kingdom and indeed should remember the history that we have together. He mentioned poverty, and I remember with great sadness, sorrow and regret the impact of the famine on Ireland. And he reminded me that what we do in life echoes in eternity, as someone once said in a movie. We may not be able to set right the injustices of the past, but I think his speech reminded me that we can certainly avoid perpetuating injustices today and into the future. And I'm grateful to him for the manner in which he set out that in his speech. Economic ties between us have been elaborated in the course of this debate. I'll just add that in the 4 quarters to 2023, Ireland was the UK's 3rd largest export partner and the 10th largest source of imports. Beyond those statistics, of course, these close economic ties and the contribution of Irish businesses to our economy is demonstrated, as pointed out by my right honourable friend, the member for Staffordshire Moorlands, by the fact that I think she may not have mentioned Kerrygold, but I was expecting her to mention that Kerrygold, did I miss it? She mentioned Kerrygold is packaged in her constituency in Staffordshire. Another example, of course, is Guinness packaging in Belfast and Runcorn. The impact of Irish people on UK public life has, of course, been profound, and I'm very grateful that a number of members set out how. I was planning to mention 2 former British Prime Ministers, the Earl of Shelburne and the Duke of Wellington, but the right honourable lady beat me to it. I did actually have to check that those 2 Prime Ministers weren't guilty of some crime against the Irish before I mentioned them, but I discovered that they were great champions of Catholic emancipation, so for that I'm very grateful. I can also add the name of Edmund Burke, somebody from whom many of us have learned a great deal. I also want to touch on the peace process. The anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement was a great thing to witness, and one of the things it revealed was the immense goodwill for the island of Ireland and for Northern Ireland in particular from right across the world. People have invested a vast amount of their lives and their careers into making sure that Northern Ireland is peaceful and that the prospect of reconciliation can be held out. So I'd like to pay tribute to some individuals who I have actually been privileged to meet in the course of the anniversary, and some which, alas, I couldn't. I want to refer to the relationship between Garret Fitzgerald and Margaret Thatcher, leading to the Anglo-Irish Agreement in 1985, the relationship between John Major and Albert Reynolds, the robust collegiality between Bertie Ahern and Tony Blair, and their stalwart work, of course, secured the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I want to mark the enormous contributions of the Irish presidents Mary Robinson and Mary McAleese, who demonstrated valiant leadership during some of the darkest days when it seemed like the peace process might never come to pass. The UK Government is firmly committed to upholding and promoting the established structures created by the agreement to support the prosperity of the Irish people, who want to strengthen their identity and culture as part of the wider family of nations that make up the UK. Furthermore, the robust health of the Strand 3 institutions reflects the depth of commitment from both governments to our roles as co-guarantors of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. Far from being mere talking shops, these fora have allowed us, will continue to allow us, to have honest and constructive discussions, not only on the subjects on which our two governments agree, but also on those areas, one of which the Honourable Lady opposite identified, where we've disagreed. And I want to say I'm extremely grateful to all of the other UK government ministers who've come along to the British Irish Intergovernmental Council, and I know it's been appreciated by the Government of Ireland. For too long, of course, Strand 3 stood alone as the only show in town, so I'm delighted at this time, as we approach St Patrick's Day, we can once again celebrate the full restoration of all three strands of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement through the North-South Ministerial Council, through the upcoming meetings of the British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference, the British-Irish Council, and, of course, the fully functioning Assembly and Executive. I particularly want to pay tribute to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister of the Executive for the inspirational leadership they're providing to everyone through the way they're coming together in the best interests of the people of Northern Ireland. So finally, I finish by reflecting that this familial relationship with Ireland is absolutely fundamental to the UK government. It is so important to people across the UK. Many of us look forward to the annual St Patrick's Day celebrations, which showcase the contributions of Irish women and men. Some of these celebrations this year will include parades through the cities of Belfast, Cardiff, Glasgow, Liverpool, Leeds, and of course at Trafalgar Square. I know that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, is looking forward to 100,000 welcomes in the US this week for St Patrick's Day celebrations. And Mr Sharma, it only remains for me, as others have done, to thank all of those generations of Irish people who have contributed so much to help make this great country as great as it is, to wish everyone here and all those people looking forward to celebrating a very happy St Patrick's Day.
Thank you, Mr. Rebecca Bailey, to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Very briefly, I want to thank the Shadow Minister and Minister for their comments. I think it's been a very collegiate and warm debate that highlights the best that Parliament can be. And no matter what our political affiliations, I think our Irish heritage or our love of Irish heritage brings us together in this House. And I think to just touch on the point, the Minister thought it was hilarious that I'd mentioned Lord McAlpine. He might be a Tory, but he's our Tory, so he stays on the list. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered St Patrick's Day and the contribution of the Irish diaspora to the UK. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned. Bye.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.